everybody. Welcome to Roll or Die episode 46. Today we have the amazing Sy Nadji, father of Riker, I just found out. And he is part of the landscape of, I guess, event organization in Melbourne, various styles. We'll probably go into that. But he's also just recently been on the podcast, the Absolutely Unnecessary podcast with Simon Carson, and talked a lot about what was going on in the scene right now and for the future. So I definitely recommend that you get over there and watch that. I think we want to try and go down some other avenues today. But Sy, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Anton. Thanks, Kim, for having me.
And I think you're actually one of our first non-grappling guests, one of our first non-primarily grappling guests. I think we've had a wrestler or two on. Yeah, you do dabble though in the promotion of jiu-jitsu events. Yeah, talk to us about those.
Yeah. It's I just started doing judo, so I've done 3 classes. So I think I'm a grappler.
He's a grappler, people. You heard it here first.
And I did wrestle for a lot of years. I did do jiu-jitsu, but yeah, so I do. My main sort of connection to grappling at the moment is the stuff we did with Boa Super 8, and hopefully we'll do again in the future.
Yeah.
But obviously the other side of the main part of my promotions are the Thai boxing, Muay Thai promotions, Rebellion and Roots and Road to Rebellion.
Do you remember your first ever event? Like, how did you fall into this? How did you get started? What was the kind of the catalyst, I guess, for creating? Because one of the things, I mean, Boa is huge in the sense that it really professionalized us, as a jiu-jitsu community. It really took, it was a whole different ballgame for the kinds of shows that were put on previously. And I think it really speaks to the fact that it came from somewhere else, but going way back to the beginning, like, when was your first event and what caused it?
The first Rebellion was December 11, 2011. So I guess, like, I started in martial arts when I was 12 years old or 13 years old, which is a lot of years ago. And like, I guess the romantic side of it is that, like, a lot of people my age, we got into martial arts because of Enter the Dragon and all these people coming into the tournament, and then like Bloodsport. And I know this stuff sounds cheesy, but it's that tournament. It's got that thing about it. Yeah. And then from an early age, like, we'd go, like, I did Taekwondo, which you just have these massive, at the old glass house, I think it's called the Entertainment Center now, and there'd be thousands of kids and adults and stuff. But I used to go to a lot of the old kickboxing shows and things here, the Tarek Solak events. The Christopher Kronos, like, people think our shows are big. We used to go to, again, the glass house when I stand the man for Masaki Satake. It was 8,000 people or something there. I was, I think, 19 or 18. I'm sitting on the floor, and it was just a big event. And then there was the crowning event, which was an 8-man tournament. So I'd seen a lot of those. And then, I think a lot of people would probably relate. There's UFC fans, but then there's Pride FC fans. And I was a Pride FC fan, where, like, that was my thing.
Yeah.
And I started watching UFC from, like, UFC number 2. But I loved Pride, and just the whole story around it. And it's got like, the way I think about it had soul. Like, it's not just fights and crowd. There's something to it.
Yeah.
And look, having trained, like, I used to train Muay Thai with Laos Tui when I was 16, 17, and then went back when I was in my mid-teens, after I'd kind of just gone and wrestled. And I remember we had a couple of boys that wanted to fight full Thai with elbows, and Laos saying there just isn't enough shows with full Muay Thai guys wanting to fight with elbows. And we started having Thai boxing at our gym, and I had 2-3 Thai trainers, and we'd go to shows, and there'd be a couple of kickboxing fights, a boxing fight, a kids padded fight, but there was just never a specialist event. And that sort of catalyst was the catalyst for me to go, okay, well, I'm going to do my own show. And the original idea was there was just going to be like a just a regular local event where we just got 10 matchups, no glitz and glamour, and obviously that just completely went the other way since then.
Wow. And was it designed for this, like when you first got into it, were you doing it for the competitors or were you doing it for the spectators? Like were you trying to make money out of it or were you trying to empower the sport?
I wanted to help the sport, but I just want, like, I've been to events where it's really well run for the fighters, and it's for half the fighters who are like the home people, and then it kind of sucks for the fans. I've been to events which are just fan friendly, and the matchups are like terrible.
Yeah.
So the goal was like, I want people to, if they fight on it, I want it to be prestigious for them. If they get to go watch it, it's like a experience. And then if you've, as a gym owner, if you've got, or a trainer, if you've got fighters on it, I want it to be something special for you as well. Because the trainers, like fighters and students, obviously always are the center of attention in a lot of things, but they don't realize the sort of time and sacrifices that the trainers put into it. And, you know, we had shows where we'd have a guy fighting in the main event, it'd be like 2:30 in the morning and the fight hadn't even started, or they put weigh-ins at the wrong place. So you take someone interstate and no one would pick you up at the airport, or you'd stay at, like, you know, we'd stay a couple of times in country Victoria, we stayed at a hotel room above a pub. And I'm like, man, these days I go to bed at 9:15, 11:30.
So do I.
You know, and it's like hearing the music. It's like, man, I want people to feel special. Like, when you're an amateur, but when you're a pro, you gotta, like, we can't pay the people the sort of money that you think as a pro, but I want people to feel special. I want them to have a walkout. I want the trainers not to feel like they're getting jibbed. Like, it's, a lot of trainers will just stop putting fighters in because it's just, you know, they rather just run their business than have to deal with traveling for shows and dishing out of their own money just to have someone fight.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort, isn't it, in the background? Like, there's so much. Like, I've seen you at your own events, and there's just, like, you are the linchpin, and it's like, if you got sick or, I don't know, whatever, it looks like these things would not actually run. You know what I mean? It looks like, and there's so much knowledge, there's so much insight, and there's so much in the moment choices and decisions that have to be made, and tough calls and tough conversations to have. These things are really hard to run. Is that your experience, or am I just...
Yeah, like, I think, you know, when you start doing jiu-jitsu and you learn, like, the first time you look at it, I remember the first time we ever went and did jiu-jitsu was at, I was 17, and it was at the shooting range in Essendon, and it was a John Will club, and we went there, and we were Taekwondo guys. Yeah. And I remember watching the guys rolling, and it literally looked like people just going, 4 classes. It is. It's like, well, they're just doing nothing. 4 classes in, you go, okay, I understand this is a position. That's what that transition is. Yeah. And then over time, it makes sense. And it's the same with, you know, the things you do grappling. There's like the technique you learn, but the timing of it and the execution of it, that comes from doing it all the time. And I think close to 50 events in the last 10 years, it's that trial and error, and some of that stuff, like everything, like what you guys do, like, it becomes second nature. Yeah. But you just got to be willing to suck eggs for a while to sort of improve it.
Sure.
What you were saying there about, you know, jiu-jitsu looking like chaos, I'll be honest, like, I'm a bit of a novice with Muay Thai, but to me, it still seems like it's fairly self-explanatory for the casual observer in terms of going to and watching events. How do you need to do anything different in terms of running jiu-jitsu events, given that it is pretty rule-centric, and even for people that do jiu-jitsu, it can be a little bit confusing to watch? Do you...
Well, we sort of have the same issue with Muay Thai as well, Kim, because it's like yesterday, Canelo fought Callum Smith in boxing, and there was a photo today, and he's got this massive burst muscle in his arm, and Canelo was saying, I'm punching his arm so he couldn't counter me with a left hook. Now, in Thai boxing, kicking someone in the arms is a way, it's a score, but it's also a way of stopping them from punching you. a lot of the people in the crowd that come and watch Thai boxing and people who even compete in it don't even understand that. So we still, like to this day, are having to educate people about the rules of Muay Thai. So they go, oh, I threw 500 kicks and 600 punches. It's like, yeah, but 3 of them landed, and this guy threw 20 and 19 of them landed. Who do you think should win the fight? So we have that. I think what I found with Boa was actually the other way around, where other than the last shemazel with some of the couple of the competitors not understanding the scoring, the people who come to jiu-jitsu are super knowledgeable already. So we had my security guys that do all my events. They were like, these guys, these nerds, they're just sitting there. They don't cheer. They don't do anything. I'm like, they actually understand exactly what's going on. So out of a jiu-jitsu crowd, 95% of the people would know what's going on. At a Thai boxing event, a lot of the people have come in because their mate's fighting and they see the opponent sitting against the ropes, their mate keeping him against the ropes, and they go, well, he won the fight. It's like, yeah, he was at the ropes, but he was kneeing him and kicking him, and your mate was just getting battered and bruised. So
yeah,
I think the challenge with that I now saw at the last Boa, which is something I've got to really work on for the future ones, is getting one understandable, clear rule set. Because like I've been around jiu-jitsu a lot, but as a lot of times the referees and stuff want to remind me I'm still a white belt, but I kind of make sure I read and understand the rules. But a lot of the fighters and stuff, they just assume and they show up and it's like, did you read this? Were you at the weigh-in when I explained it? Were you there? Did you ask a question? And they don't. And then because it's not like the ball either went through the goals or didn't go through the goals. There's that fine area. It's like, well, you know, then there's the controversy that comes with it.
100%. In fact, I saw just a post the other day from a guy who was in a high-profile event, and he's quite a high-profile BJJ competitor, and he was saying, had I known the rules before I entered, I wouldn't have entered. But that's
I saw that.
The rules are always available, so, or usually at least, or they should be. Actually, that's a good point. So how do you make sure, like, from a promotion perspective, is there any way that you've learned how to as you said, you're going to go to work on it, but what do you plan to do to safeguard these sorts of things and make sure that people who are entering are really well set up?
I think next time round, the rule set we agree on, I think definitely the rule explanation can't be at the weigh-ins or on the night. That should be a refresher. I think Tiago, the first couple, did a really good job of explaining it on the night, but people still kind of like wandered off a little bit, even though most of them had signed an agreement about what the rules were going to be.
Yeah.
At our show, at the last show, I did it at the weigh-in, and some of the people went, but the referees hadn't really carried on to it either. And if you remember when Pomaski and Stewart fought, and they did the guard pull in overtime, I was in the back talking to probably James Brasco about his shorts or something. And when they called me and I came back out, I didn't know if it was in the main round or in the overtime. So they asked me something. I'm like, yeah, no, we've said that's not going to be a point off. And then I realized I was in the overtime because I didn't know at what stage of the match that was. And the rules were different. And then that's why he was sitting in the middle of the mat and he was upset. I'm like, we were fairly clear about this the night before.
Yeah.
But I think at the time of the rules, he literally went to the bathrooms. But then the referees were a bit unsure too. So they're bringing up Google. I'm like, man, it's never going to be a good look to Google ADCC rules and show it to them. No, and they were right. Like they made the right call. He misunderstood what was said at the weigh-in because it was about regular time and overtime. So I think the next time around we need to do a more detailed rule set, send it in, get them to initial it, maybe do an explanation video and go, guys, this is where it's at. But also I think we just need to find the most, like I've got one idea for a rule set, but it's something I'd want to talk to like Tiago and, Lockie and guys like that and say, look, does this make sense to you? I think it just needs to be one rule set. That I think that as a sort of more wrestling based guy, I like the idea of like if you pull guard, you lose a point. It should be executed, but other people aren't going to want that. So it should be one rule set that's clear to follow.
Do you think it's appropriate to quiz them, like to give them a Google quiz with 50 questions on the fighters, and have them answer the more controversial points and kind of test them? Is that an inappropriate kind of approach to show?
Potentially, but I'll be really honest. Like the jiu-jitsu people that I've dealt with, they seem like quite intelligent, well-spoken. They understand things. They read things. But as the event promoter, I can have the #1 Thai boxer in the world fighting for a world title on my show. And when I speak to them, there isn't that I'm a black belt, you're a white belt, I can't even be bothered with this conversation.
Yes.
Whereas and that's been one of the things I've never really liked about traditional martial arts since I was a kid, that belt hierarchy on the mat sort of carries on to everything as long as it's attached to it. And it gets quite dismissive. And it's like, listen, there's a reason why you need to stand over there for a professional show. There's a reason why you need to do this. Whereas it's like, and I don't know, like maybe I can get, Lockie or Tiago, whoever does it, to ask them that. But I think there is a certain amount of like arrogance / confidence that kind of stops that stuff.
Kim is exactly like that with me. She's black, I'm purple, and she just treats me like shit.
I know, man. I don't even know why we're doing this podcast together, honestly. There needs to be another black belt sharing this role with me, honestly. It explains a lot, doesn't it? It really does.
I totally do get it, though. Like, I do think that the high-level competitors as well, you mix a high-level kind of someone who's trained a lot at something and you mix someone who's successful at competition, there's a certain amount of arrogance that comes with that sort of character, I think. Oh yeah,
I understand.
Yes and no. I mean, we had Lockie on like 2 episodes ago. I don't think you could say he's probably one of the most successful competitors in Australian Jiu-Jitsu, but I don't think there's a whole lot of arrogance there. So it does really vary person to person as well. I think
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. And where do you see the future of Muay Thai promoting in general, given, the way the world is now and what 2021 brings? Like, what are your plans for next year?
It's hard because I've got 2 tier of shows. So I've got Rebellion, which is sort of world-class top line guys. And then we've got Roots, which is the novice professionals. So my plan for the next couple of shows at least is just to do Roots, because I think, it's going to be hard or impossible to bring overseas fighters in, and even interstate. Like we could have let's say we'd had a show planned for next week and Sydney got closed, we could have lost our card. So that's going to be a big impact. I'm just talking to venues now for my first show at the end of February, and, capacity and stuff's going to be an issue. And, a little bit of it's going to be compliance too, because I'm sure there's a lot out everywhere, but there's probably a disproportionate amount of tinfoil hat people in the Muay Thai community who are probably going to like bulk at regulations and stuff in. And I'm like, on a night where there's a show running, I don't actually care if your YouTube research or not agrees with it. It's just what we have to do to get it done.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to get stuck too much into that. So those are the things we've got to really be considerate with it, is capacity and bringing people in. Because even if they come in and, I've got friends who are part of fairly large international organizations and they're getting 20 fighters showing up into Singapore, going into quarantine, and then 11 of them testing positive. So,
wow.
Yeah. And what about streaming? Like, do you reckon that might be a bit more, given the capacity, like the crowd numbers might be limited? Are you going to look more into that sort of thing, or what's your plans?
Look, I think I've probably been most consistent with streaming here with Rebellion and Boa. The numbers, the board sort of, when the idea of fighting came about again, they said, look, you can do a show without a crowd and you can live stream it. So obviously you'd get more, but to put it into context, the biggest pay-per-view revenue I ever got out of a Rebellion event was $8,000. The guy in my main event alone cost $15,000 just for his fight, not his flights, not his opponent from overseas, not anything else. So the revenue isn't quite there. I'm sure we'll get a lot more people because, you know, we can't fit 1,000 people into a venue, but it's still, with the amount of free stuff that's out there, it's questionable how much people will pay. I mean, we just subscribe to the Zone to get all the boxing stuff, and it's $2.99 a month. Yeah. And you're watching Canelo fight. So people will pay for a niche thing, but I don't think it's going to be at a point of, well, we're going to get $70,000 worth of pay-per-view and that'll justify paying for a show. I mean, like Boa, I think over the first 3 did fairly decent pay-per-view numbers, but still not even close to that. And then the last one where we had it with Flow Grappling, like it was like almost nothing what we got paid for it. So it's a challenge.
And Flow Grappling I found really expensive as a subscription service. So I guess that's, you know, like, so for me, I subscribed for it when I could see myself on it, you know, because I was in like an event. But other than that, I wouldn't pay. So that's the thing. Like as a user, like I always pay for events if my mates are in them. But I definitely understand that, you know, there's people who've got limited money to point and shoot at different things, and it's a real luxury to subscribe to an event.
Yeah, I mean, like I always buy all the Muay Thai show in Australia because I want to see what potential fighters are coming through, but it's just, I'm not going to fly. And half the time, if it's in Melbourne, like I said, I'm asleep at 9 o'clock. So it's kind of like a little way of like chucking in $30 towards it.
Yeah.
And like I've got a UFC Fight Pass subscription, and I think that's great. Like it's great value for money. But I think we're still a while to go until we've got like significant money. And like the Flow Grappling thing for me was because I thought it would give the show good exposure and potential sponsors. But then you got to, like, it's hard to measure out of how many eyes actually saw it, and would we be better off just having our own pay-per-view here?
Yeah. Actually, on the sorry, Kim, one more question on this. While you were talking about UFC, I noticed that their Fight Pass at the moment has a fair bit of combat jiu-jitsu and submission only, like underground stuff. Is that an area like combat jiu-jitsu? Is that something that's got your interest for events in the future? Because I do think that there's an interest in that. It's kind of like a bit of a crossover, or do you think it's not in the kind of area that you want to explore?
I think like I've got a plan to do an MMA show in June or July. And I kind of want to keep them fairly pure. Like I want to get my head around Boa a little bit better. And we've got Rebellion and then an MMA show and potentially something with boxing. And I kind of want to keep them a bit separated.
Yeah.
I like a couple of combat jiu-jitsu stuff I've watched. I don't know. Part of me just goes, if you want to like actually hit each other,
do MMA.
Do MMA.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
I don't like, and you know, it's bad because obviously we modified the rules a bit, but I kind of just go, it'll be nice for the sports to be able to stand on their own 2 legs and have a following. Like, be a jiu-jitsu event, be a pure Muay Thai, and that's why I kind of struggle with K1 kickboxing sometimes. I'm like, the rules are just show to show all the time changing, and it's like, what can we find that's one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had to do a little bit of research about you because, as I said, I'm pretty a novice with Muay Thai, and so I asked one of my Muay Thai friends what sort of things I could ask you, and she told me that out the back of the Rebellion routes, you've got a poster that says "Always display beautiful Muay Thai."
Yeah.
And what does that mean to you?
So it's a poster of Jordan Coe, who is a Scottish fighter we brought out to Rebellion twice, and I met him those 2 times and spoke to him on Facebook a bunch of times. And that kid, when he came out, like his walkouts alone, the venue went off. And when he fought, he just such a beautiful technician, like perfect style. Like it's like his Thai, and just so amazing. And unfortunately, about 3.5 years ago. He actually passed away making weight for a fight in Thailand. And when I found out, I literally landed in Bangkok to go and meet with Fairtex, who are my sponsors. And I got off the plane and I turned my phone on and there was like 50 messages. And I remember standing at the customs and I thought, man, they're going to like take me for a strip search because I looked like I was about to fall over.
Yeah.
And he passed away. So it's a little bit of a tribute to him because like he just, the way he fought and the way he carried himself. And I think Thai boxing so much, not just about punching and kicking, but it's just about even the judges, they look at your composure and how relaxed you are and how balanced you are. And that's what I love about Muay Thai is like, it's an art form. Like it's a real brutal fight sport, but it's an art form. And there's so many intricate things about it. And I think Jordan just all around kind of captured that so much. And so from the first show after that, we've always had that picture of him coming out to the ring with Display Beautiful Muay Thai. And then we've got an award that we hand out at every show in his honor. But yeah, I just like for me, that's why I've got the Roots show. It's a reggae show. It's named after different Bob Marley songs. And people come in to watch fights, but we're playing reggae and dance hall the whole time. And the vibe is so chilled. And there's a lot of dodgy shit that goes on in fight sports. And I think it doesn't need to be that. And like showing beautiful Muay Thai, listening to reggae, like having a nice atmosphere. I think for me, it's important. I don't want to do it any other way.
Beautiful. Wow. That's so intense.
Beautiful.
I can't believe it. Like, I guess that's altered your view of, or it must have had an impact on your view of cutting weight, for martial arts. You know, where has that left you? I mean, now that you know someone personally who's passed away as a result.
It's real funny, Anton. Like the first time he came to the show, or the second time, the weight we'd agreed on, he'd asked for, and the other guy had come in well under. He was struggling to make it, and he was like messaging me, and I was like breaking his balls, like joking around with him. And we'd already agreed that he was going to be half a kilo bigger. And I'm like, man, I don't know what he was doing to cut it. But I remember when I wrestled just for the 2000 Olympic trials, we had a 52 kilo wrestler. And this was the Australian titles. And he would have won. This was the Oceania titles. He'd won the Australian title. And he basically had one guy to beat at the Oceania. He would have gone to the Sydney Olympics. And this kid ended up missing weight by like 90 grams or something. And I always remember I was 23, 24. We had him at the saunas in MSAC. Basically, he was almost past that. And we were like shaking him, trying to get there. And we were so scared of our coach that we thought if we go back there, and we took him there and he missed weight, and we all got screamed at in front of everyone in wrestling in Australia. And we was like, it was so bad. But now, after that happened with Jordan and all these shows that I've seen, we always joke about my wife and one of her friends came to the Boa weigh-ins, and I'm like, it's all these good-looking Brazilian dudes. They cut a little bit of weight and they're sitting there having their protein. You go to a Muay Thai event or a boxing event and they look like crackheads, like drawn out, like, and get on. And it's like, man, most of these guys are going to have 10, 20 fights. It's not the end of their lives. And for a young kid, 21-year-old kid to die because of it. Yeah. It's, I always tell my wife, I'm like always on a thin line of being a fight sports promoter or being like a full-time campaigner to get everything banned. Like I see the good part of it. And then there's some of the other parts of it that I watch. I'm just like, I get horrified, like mismatches, bad referees that let fighters go too far.
Oh my God, yeah.
The way people train in gyms sometimes after they've been knocked out, I'm like, man, these guys, this is like a sport. These guys who's going to make a career? And is it worth having a career where when you're 55, 60 years old, your brain damage? Like, so it's a fine line.
Yeah, man, I totally understand how you would feel that way. Thank you for sharing that. That's like, I never knew any of this, of course. That's why we do this show. But I just thank you for sharing all of this so openly, because it really, there's a lot that goes on in the background of these sports and these arts and these events that people just wouldn't be aware of. They rock up, they either have a good time or they rock up and they compete and they go home. But there's so much, there's aftermath, there's real life ongoing impacts in families and whole communities as a result of some of these choices that coaches sometimes impose. Like you were saying, so you were on a wrestling team, is that right?
Well, when I wrestled in Victoria, so I got my ass kicked at the trials anyway, so I was a non-factor, but he would have made it. But it's just the wrestling culture is how much weight you cut.
Right.
And I think back at it, I think I used to walk around at 88 kilos and wrestle at 84.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, I should have been like a 76 kilo guy.
Yeah.
But these guys used to cut so much weight, and I see it with Muay Thai and boxing, and wrestling was notorious. And then now with MMA, the stuff that happens with that.
Mm.
And I think like one championship is trying to sort it out. But the problem is like, it's like drug testing. Fighters and gyms will always find a way around it because it's never going to happen to you. But it's like, man, a young girl died cutting for an amateur Muay Thai fight in WA 2 years ago. Like 19 years old, 18 years old.
It's just unnecessary, really. If everyone's not cutting weight, then it doesn't matter. It's only if it was just stopped altogether, so everyone just competed at the weight they walk around on, then there'd be no reason at all to cut weight. So
yeah, it's become I think that's one of the bad parts of maybe MMA that's really brought into other fight sports is this whole fight camp thing where guys fight at 63.5 kilos Muay Thai, then for the next 6 months they're walking around at 90 kilos and then they're in camp, and it's like, well, how healthy is that? And how healthy is that then also, like, maybe Kim can say if this is right or not. I think like especially with female athletes that fluctuate their weight up and down so much, and like get into that super low body fat percentage and what it does to you hormonally and things. And it's like, you can put as many rules as you want, people will crack it, but it's the education part of it. It's like a lot of the coaches, like we said before, you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, or you're a Muay Thai trainer, and it doesn't mean you understand the effects.
Yeah, 100%. For sure. Look, most of the time as well with jiu-jitsu, majority of jiu-jitsu events are amateur events. So you're not even getting paid for it. I mean, I don't really understand why people put themselves through that just for the sake of winning a division where maybe they would have been at the bottom of the division below, above, if they hadn't cut the weight. So yeah, as a female, it's very, very hard to cut weight with the hormonal factors and things like that in. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I remember I think the last Pampax I went in, I cut down to, is it 77 kilos or 76? Yeah. I cut down to that, and I was,
I think.
Sorry?
76, I think.
Yeah, and I remember like you were supposed to weigh in and then get on the mat, and I weighed in at 9:30, and your match was supposed to be straight away. My first match was at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I went and ate like $200 worth of sushi and water. I was like so blown up. I was like, did you need to have that weigh-in at that time? Did you even need to cut for something? It was just bizarre.
Yeah. Crazy. I think a lot of people think it, and we are running out of time, but I think, a lot of people think it's like the battle that you have to win before the battle. It adds to the addiction of the whole sport. Like for me, it does. I remember the
subculture of it. They walk around the gym with their sweats on and I'm cutting weight, and they do all that stuff. And it's like, we go away with our fighters, or sometimes they come here and they make weight, and then I'll watch them eat a giant bag of like chips and chocolate and Coke and go out to dinner 3 pizzas. I'm like, you don't normally eat that. You got to fight tomorrow. What are you doing eating that now? Like,
yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah, as Anton said, I think we are nearly out of time, but we want to thank you very much for being on the show. As I said, you're the first non-grappling person, hopefully not the last.
He's a grappler.
Oh, sorry. Come on, but you're known for being a striking promoter. Let's face it. Look, thank you so much.
Behind me, so
You've definitely been on our list for a long, long time. Anton and I have wanted to have you on. So, thank you so much. You're a busy man. Thanks for giving up your time.
And a beautiful man. Like, seriously, I don't just mean physically. I mean that you are someone who is very authentic about the fact that you walk a fine line of being in something that can cause harm as well as cause amazing growth for people. And I really love that about you, man. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that, man. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Peace
so
out,
thank
everybody.
you once again. We will aim to have this out the week of Christmas. So Merry Christmas to everyone, to all our listeners. Merry Christmas, guys. And hopefully we'll have some more kick-ass events in the new year with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Anton.
Thanks,
See
mate.
ya.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.